The prison at night was never truly silent. There were always echoes, distant shouts, the clanging of iron doors, the heavy footsteps of guards patrolling the concrete corridors. Yet there was one part of the prison where silence seemed to reign. It wasn't because the inmates were asleep or because the guards were more vigilant. It was because of her. The most feared woman in the prison lived in that block, and her very presence demanded quiet. For newcomers, it started with whispers. Before they even laid eyes on her, the warnings would spread. Don't look at her too long. Don't sit too close. Don't get in her way. Most prisons had dangerous women, fighters, gang leaders, manipulators. But she was something else entirely. She didn't need to raise her voice, didn't need to throw the first punch. Her reputation alone kept others in line. The moment she stepped into the yard, conversations slowed. Even hardened criminals, women who had stabbed, robbed, or killed without blinking, shifted out of her path. The guards weren't immune either. On paper, they had authority over her, but in reality, many feared her more than the inmates did. Some of them avoided eye contact when they walked by her cell, while others treated her with the kind of cautious respect usually reserved for dangerous animals. She had a way of watching people, a cold stare that made you feel exposed, as if she could see the weakness inside you and would use it when the time was right. Her crimes on the outside were enough to put her on the prison's radar, but what made her legend grow was how she adapted once inside. Some criminals collapse when caged. They lose their power once stripped of money, weapons, and freedom. But she was different. She treated the prison not as a punishment, but as a new territory to conquer. Within weeks, her control was felt everywhere. Food trays were delivered differently. Small trades among inmates flowed through her approval, and even the black market economy of cigarettes and contraband seemed to bend in her favor. The older inmates recognized quickly that she wasn't someone to test. One story often repeated among the women involved a confrontation in the cafeteria. A tough inmate, someone known for picking fights with new arrivals, decided to challenge her. No one remembers the exact words exchanged, but what they do remember is how quickly it ended. One minute the woman was smirking, the next she was sprawled on the floor, gasping for breath, with her own tray shattered beside her. No guard dared question how it happened. No inmate dared laugh. The message was clear. She was untouchable. What terrified people most wasn't just the violence. It was the control. Violence was easy to understand. Anyone could throw a punch. But she chose her moments carefully, never wasting energy, never acting without purpose. Her punishments were precise, her warnings subtle. A single glance from her was enough to change someone's behavior. She didn't just fight her battles, she won them before they even began. Even in her cell, she carried an unsettling calm. She would sit with perfect composure, reading, writing, or sometimes simply staring into the hallway. That stillness frightened people more than outbursts ever could. It made her seem less like a prisoner and more like a predator waiting patiently for the right moment to strike. Inmates often debated what made her so powerful. Some said it was her intelligence. Others swore it was her willingness to do what no one else dared. But deep down, everyone agreed on one thing. She wasn't just another prisoner. She was the kind of person who made the walls feel smaller, the guards weaker, and the air heavier. She didn't just live inside the prison. She owned it, piece by piece, without ever needing to say a word. And so, the legend of the most feared woman grew, fed by whispers, fueled by fear, and strengthened by every silent step she took through the yard. Long before the prison walls closed around her, the seeds of her reputation were already planted. She wasn't born into privilege or comfort. Her childhood was a battlefield where survival meant learning how to fight, manipulate, and dominate before most children even knew how to spell their own names. Growing up in a neighborhood swallowed by poverty and crime, She witnessed brutality as an everyday routine. Violence wasn't shocking. It was normal. By the time she was 10, she had seen more blood on the streets than most adults would see in a lifetime. Her home offered little refuge. With a father absent and a mother trapped in addiction, she quickly learned that no one was coming to protect her. So she became her own protector. Some kids sought friendship for comfort. She sought it for survival. She gravitated toward older boys and local gang members, observing them, studying how they moved, how they commanded respect. By the age of 13, she was running errands for them, carrying messages, and sometimes even hiding their weapons. She was too young to be taken seriously by rivals, which made her the perfect tool for those who underestimated her. But unlike others her age, she wasn't being used. She was learning. Every betrayal, every act of violence she witnessed became a lesson. She learned when to strike, when to stay silent, and most importantly, when to make someone else do the dirty work for her. Her ability to manipulate grew sharper with every passing year. She could read people's weaknesses the way others read books. If someone had a temper, she knew how to provoke it. If someone had pride, she knew how to flatter it. By 15, she wasn't just surviving, she was commanding. Her first real crime wasn't theft or drugs, it was revenge. When a rival threatened her younger brother, she didn't run for help. She planned. Over the course of weeks, she observed, waiting for the perfect opportunity. Then, one night, the rival was found beaten within an inch of his life. No one could prove it was her, but in the streets, proof didn't matter. Rumors were enough. From then on, people whispered her name with caution. She had crossed the line from survivor to predator. Her teenage years were a blur of rising power. She became involved in drug distribution, not as a low-level runner, but as someone pulling strings. Older men twice her size and age took orders from her, not because she was stronger, but because she was smarter and far more ruthless. While others reacted in anger, she calculated. While others wanted money quickly, she built influence slowly. It wasn't just about profit. It was about control. Law enforcement began to notice her too. Police reports described her as a young but exceptionally dangerous individual, noting her ability to slip through charges and manipulate witnesses. Court cases fell apart because people refused to testify against her, some out of loyalty, most out of fear. By 18, she was already a ghost in the legal system, untouchable despite the chaos she created. But her rise couldn't last forever. Eventually, one mistake, or perhaps one betrayal, led to her downfall. A deal went wrong, a rival spoke to the authorities, and the law finally caught up. Yet even in handcuffs, she wasn't broken. Those who saw her arrest still remember the way she walked to the police car, chin high, expression calm, as though she was walking into an opportunity rather than a cage. In the courtroom, she turned the trial into a stage. She locked eyes with witnesses until they stumbled over their words. She smirked at prosecutors as if she knew more than they did. Even the judge felt unsettled under her gaze. When the sentence was read, years behind bars, she didn't flinch. If anything, she looked amused. To her, prison wasn't the end. It was simply a new arena where she would continue her game of power and fear. And she was right, because once the gates closed behind her, the real story of the most feared woman was only beginning. The day she entered prison, most expected her to crumble like so many others before her. Stripped of her freedom, her money, and her network, she should have been just another inmate in an orange jumpsuit. But the moment she stepped into that cold, echoing block, she wasn't defeated. She was studying. Every detail mattered to her. Which inmates commanded respect, which guards were lazy, who smuggled contraband, and who was weak enough to be used. In her mind, prison wasn't punishment. It was an opportunity to build a kingdom. Her first move was bold. Within her first week, she confronted one of the prison's long-standing enforcers, a woman known for intimidating newcomers. Instead of avoiding her, she sat directly at her table in the cafeteria, staring her down until silence fell across the room. No words were exchanged at first, just the kind of eye contact that makes people uneasy. When the other woman finally tried to assert herself, the newcomer acted with ruthless precision. A tray flipped, a quick strike, and the so-called enforcer was left humiliated on the floor. The message spread faster than fire. She was not someone to be tested. But unlike most who relied on brute force alone, she understood that fear without strategy was temporary. So, she began building her power carefully. She didn't try to be everyone's friend. Instead, she created an image of someone who could not be touched. When fights broke out among others, she remained calm, observing, deciding who could be useful and who was expendable. Within weeks, she had a small circle around her, women who obeyed not out of loyalty, but out of sheer survival instinct. Contraband soon became her second weapon. Cigarettes, blades, and even small luxuries like candy, all of it flowed through her hands. She never smuggled it herself. She made others do it for her, taking none of the risk, but all of the profit. Guards who were desperate for extra money found themselves slipping her small favors. At first it was subtle, an extra phone call, a longer shower time, but soon it escalated into blind obedience. She knew their weaknesses and played them like pieces on a chessboard. Her influence wasn't built on chaos. It was built on order. Nothing happened in her block without her knowing. If someone tried to trade contraband without her permission, they were swiftly dealt with. If someone disobeyed, they found themselves isolated, cut off from protection, and easy prey for others. Inmates realized quickly that aligning with her meant safety, while defying her meant suffering. The guards saw what was happening, but they were powerless. Any attempt to discipline her only strengthened her reputation. When she was sent to solitary confinement, she came back more respected than before. Inmates whispered about how she had stared down the officers, how she had endured without flinching. Punishment didn't weaken her. It fed the legend. What made her different from other prison leaders was her patience. She didn't lash out without reason. She chose her moments carefully, striking only when necessary, and each move reinforced her dominance. When an inmate attempted to challenge her authority months later, the outcome was swift and brutal, but controlled. She made it clear she wasn't just another fighter. She was the ruler of the prison. By the end of her first year behind bars, the transformation was complete. She no longer looked like a prisoner adapting to her environment. She looked like the environment was adapting to her. Even guards whispered her name when off duty, describing her as more dangerous inside than she had ever been out. No ruler inside a prison holds power forever without resistance, and she knew it. The same fear that kept her on top also inspired jealousy and rebellion. Some inmates wanted freedom from her control. Others simply wanted the crown for themselves. Rival groups began to whisper, plotting against her in the shadows. But she was never caught off guard. She anticipated challenges before they happened, and when they did, her response was swift, calculated, and merciless. The first serious attempt came from a coalition of inmates backed by an outside gang. They thought numbers would overwhelm her, but what they didn't realize was that she never relied on strength alone. She relied on strategy. She split her rivals apart before they could unite fully, turning one against the other with carefully planted lies. When the fight finally came, it was chaotic, but it ended with her still standing, untouched, while her challengers were dragged away by guards. For the rest of the prison, the message was clear. Even groups could not dethrone her. The officials, too, were desperate to break her grip. Reports described her as a disruptive influence, capable of destabilizing entire blocks. The warden tried transferring her to another facility, but the move only spread her reputation further. Wherever she went, her name carried weight before she even arrived. Inmates whispered her story like folklore, and guards prepared themselves for her presence with dread. She wasn't just feared, she was becoming legendary. Solitary confinement was used against her more than once. They locked her in a tiny room, stripped of company, with nothing but concrete walls and silence. For many, solitary is a breaking point, a place where minds unravel. But for her, it became a training ground. She learned patience, learned to sharpen her thoughts, and returned each time with even more authority. Inmates said she seemed different after solitary, more controlled, more dangerous, as if she had been perfecting herself in the darkness. Betrayal was another constant threat. A few of her closest allies turned on her, believing they could earn favors from guards or rival groups by selling her out. But betrayal never ended well. She was always one step ahead, sensing weakness long before others admitted it. Those who betrayed her didn't last long in the prison's ecosystem. Some were transferred, others ended up in the infirmary, and a few simply vanished from the daily routines, their fates left to rumors that kept everyone else in line. What frightened officials most was that punishments only made her stronger. Each attempt to isolate her, to break her network, to silence her, backfired. Inmates saw that she could endure what others couldn't. She was no longer just a woman serving time. She was an idea, a figure who represented unshakable power inside a world designed to crush people. And yet, she never lost her composure. She didn't rage against rivals, didn't boast about victories. She stayed calm, calculating, and patient. That quiet strength made her survival even more terrifying, because it wasn't based on luck or chaos. It was based on design. Every time she was challenged, she didn't just survive, she grew stronger. By the time years passed, her dominance was unquestionable. The prison administration still monitored her closely, but deep down, they understood the truth. She wasn't just surviving prison. She was bending prison to her will. The walls weren't holding her in. They were holding everyone else under her control. Her story inside the prison didn't stay locked behind bars. It leaked out, spreading like smoke through cracks in the system. Journalists picked up whispers about a woman so feared that even guards avoided her. Families of inmates heard stories about her dominance during visiting hours, and soon her name became more than just a prisoner's record. It became a legend. Inside, she no longer needed to prove herself. Years of absolute control had made her untouchable. Inmates treated her like a queen, not out of admiration, but out of terror. Her permission was required for everything. Who could sit where in the cafeteria, who could trade cigarettes, even who could shower without harassment. For some, aligning with her meant protection. For others, refusing her meant isolation. She had become the invisible law of the prison, a ruler whose rules outweighed those of the warden himself. What made her legacy more chilling was how it influenced the next generation of inmates. Younger women began to imitate her calmness, her silence, and her ability to control situations without raising her voice. They studied her like a textbook, hoping to learn survival in a place that crushed most spirits. In her, they saw power where none should exist. But for prison officials, this was the most dangerous part. She wasn't just ruling, she was inspiring. The outside world began to speculate as well. Documentaries attempted to piece together her life, but no one could fully explain how one woman could bend the system. Reporters asked guards off the record, and the responses were always the same. You don't understand. She doesn't act like a prisoner. She acts like the prison belongs to her. The myth grew larger than the truth, and in a way, that worked in her favor. Fear spreads faster than facts. Even her punishments fed her reputation. Solitary confinement turned into a story of her unbreakable patience. Failed transfers turned into proof of her influence in multiple facilities. The more the system tried to contain her, the stronger her image became. She was no longer just a dangerous inmate. She was a symbol of how fear itself can rule stronger than bars or guards. For those who lived alongside her, life was a constant reminder of her power. Guards hesitated before entering her block. Inmates checked over their shoulders, careful with every word. No one dared to mock her, No one dared to cross her. In their eyes, she wasn't a fellow prisoner. She was the embodiment of control. Her story leaves one haunting question that still lingers. Was she really the prisoner, or was she the one holding the prison captive? Because when one woman's reputation becomes more powerful than an entire institution, the lines blur. The walls meant to cage her only amplified her dominance, and that is why she remains the most feared woman in the prison. Not just because of what she did, not just because of the violence or the manipulation, but because she became larger than the system itself. Her legend is not written on paper. It lives in whispers, in stares, in the silence that falls whenever her footsteps echo through the corridor. In the end, her story is not about crime or punishment, it's about power. A power so absolute that even concrete walls, iron bars, and armed guards could not contain it. She entered prison as an inmate, but she stayed as something far more terrifying, the ruler of a kingdom built on fear.